We believe that future of maps is open and everyone will have access to map data.
That's Said Turksever from Meta, and in this episode he helps me answer the question, why does Meta care so much about maps?
So Meta has more than 3 billion users across different platforms, including Instagram, WhatsApp. So here at Meta, we are building our own in-house map.
From Instagram maps to Meta's AR Ray-Ban glasses, billions of people interact with these maps every single day. But what's behind it all? Well, open data.
So this is just a starting point, and then we believe that pedestrians need to have a right to navigate safely across everywhere in the world.
We talk about the tools Meta is building, the role of AI in mapping, and how communities around the world, from Naples to Phoenix to Istanbul, are shaping the future of open maps.
Students from there, they map entire Phoenix. They contributed to OpenStreetMap. They map more than 3,000 kilometers of sidewalk in a short period of time.
It's a conversation about technology, community, and why open maps matter more than ever. The future is spatial, so let's get into it. Said, welcome. Thanks for taking the time to chat today. I'm excited to talk a little bit more. I've seen a lot of your posts on LinkedIn and all the stuff you're doing with geospatial at Meta. So let's start there. Tell me a little bit about yourself, kind of what you're doing, your background, and then if you can kind of answer the question, why does Meta care about maps, and what does that mean for the things that you're doing?
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for having me today. I'm Said. I'm a geomatic engineer. I'm a project manager at Meta. I'm supporting Meta's open mapping effort. I particularly lead our open mapping strategy, where I work with OpenStreetMap community as well as with Mapillary. I think today we are going to cover why we are really caring about open data, open map data in general. And then today I'm going to share how are we using maps at Meta in general. It's one of the most asked questions whenever we are attending conferences or when we are connecting with folks in the geospatial community. So Meta has more than 3 billion users across different platforms, including Instagram, WhatsApp, also all other wearables. Recently, we launched Meta Ray-Ban glasses. So all of our users are kind of experiencing and interacting with the maps. So as you can imagine, when there are high number of users and you are getting high level of API calls, as individual users, when you are accessing the map in any platform, you don't really pay anything. But as a company, when you're using a large amount of map request, you will need to pay. So here at Meta, we are building our own in-house map with open data, and we are also part of Overture Maps Foundation, where we are using Overture Maps in our products. So these are very high level how we are using maps at Meta. And so we are also relying a lot on OpenStreetMap data, which is also backfilling some part of the Overture layers.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because so much, not just mapping, but location data is integrated across the full suite of what Meta does, and it's such a broad set of products and experiences and things like that, not just going from, apps, be it mobile or desktop, but all the way into now the physical world and experiences that you're creating there, which is really interesting. And what I love about it is, like you said, there's such a foundation in open data. You're kind of building this, integrating these experiences off of this data that, and in the turn, then benefits lots of other people. So, kind of let's dive into that a little bit. Why is open data critical to the mapping kind of infrastructure at Meta, and what's the commitment for Meta that kind of is saying why we care about open data?
Yeah, let's double click on this. First of all, I want to give a couple of surface example. So for instance, when people are checking any location on any social platform as Instagram or Facebook, they're using places data, which we are maintaining our own places database, and which may come from open data, which may not come from open data. We're also maintaining our places database. Instagram is one of the product which we empower. Recently, we released Instagram Maps feature. Maybe you heard about it. It's quite recent thing. And then whenever our users are interacting with the maps, they are interacting with our maps, which relies on open data. So why we care about open data is maintaining geospatial data is quite hard. Imagine we are serving global maps and then having a closed source of maps is not an option for us. So we think that open data is already out there, which is OpenStreetMap, which was built like 20 years ago, and then which works very well. And there is a huge community behind, and then there is a huge collaborative community which keeps maps data updated. So rather than like building our own, we decide to invest in OpenStreetMap. And then, so we work closely with OSMF as well as other OSM organizations to build communities across like different countries, as well as we are maintaining tools such as Rapid or Mapillary to help OpenStreetMap users to improve open map data. So we believe that future of maps is open and everyone will have access to map data. And also this is a way that like democratizing the open map data. So this is the meta side. Personally, I have been very long time OpenStreetMap contributor, also community builder back in Turkey. And I'm also very passionate about in general like open data, which I believe like the data which governments are collecting with our taxes, it should be like accessible for everyone, including like OpenStreetMap community with like suitable licenses.
Yeah. It's when you think about the challenge of building, I mean, you're basically building the same product as like Google Maps or any, like giant base map, kind of provider with the data, the ability to validate that, check it, all these different things. It's no small feat because you're facing, it's a consumer facing product. Millions, if not billions of people are interacting with it on a a daily basis. And how do you kind of tackle that challenge is there's a few ways you can do that. You can go get the data, you can keep it behind the curtain and build that yourselves, or you can kind of tap into this thing that has, like you said, evolved, and you've been involved in OSM for years. Started to, it's just grown into this kind of massive effort where, now not just, the biggest companies in the world, but anyone who needs access to that data can benefit. And that's always been the thing that's interested me, is the ability just to quickly interact with that data, make edits to it, and then it benefits so many different things that we don't even know, see, and touch on a daily basis. So it's very critical to the modern mapping infrastructure. I just don't see that I don't see modern mapping at that scale existing without open data and kind of that commitment to it. And I think it's been seen time and time again and proved from there. But as you are working with the data, both at Meta and personally, hold on a sec. I think it froze up again. Yeah, I mean, I think what you're highlighting here is, what you're creating is a true global map product on the scale of something like Google Maps or Apple Maps or anything like that, where millions, if not billions of people are interacting with these things on a regular basis, right? So it's no small feat. And I think what you mentioned is really critical, is that I don't think these modern mapping infrastructures exist without good open data that people are collecting. And the kind of the agreement that I think is created is that anyone from the largest organizations in the world to someone creating their own personal project can benefit from the value of this data, both as a contributor and as a user of the data, which is really, I think it's unique. I don't see many places like that across the tech world, where there's this kind of agreement between these very large bodies to create all these different things together. And that's, I've seen that time and time again with, the value of OSM data, both in, responding to things, people contributing that, all these different things. And I think it's truly unique. And I think what would be cool is to hear, how both in your kind of personal work with OSM as well as in what you're doing with Meta, what are some of the kind of tools and processes that you're using to kind of interact with the data? What does that look like? Because I think, for lots of us, maybe it's just querying some data, getting some, maybe a building footprints or places or stuff like that. But what does that look like on just the biggest scale in the world? What does that look like? And how are you doing?
I think like overall, like OpenStreetMap project is like fascinating because there are a bunch of contributors out there. They are very committed to maintain the data, which is the number one benefit, which we are giving our data to OSM, and we are helping like community to improve map data with our tooling, and we are getting back from community whenever like they're updating the data sets. So imagine like very simple example, someone adds building footprint to the OpenStreetMap project. So let's imagine like a user at the building footprint, and then some other user or some other company or organizational editor add like other attributes like building level, point of interest within this building, address point, etc. So this collaborative approach makes data staying up to date and fresh and complete. So we believe that this is one of the really huge benefit of like OpenStreetMap. There is a community who is watching the data quality as well as data freshness. So when it comes to like how are we basically like solving and maintaining like the completeness of this data or quality of data sets. So there are a couple of tools we are maintaining. So rapid editing tool is one of the tool that it's developed by Meta. It's an open source. So it's a OpenStreetMap editing tool, which basically helps community to improve maps. So it has several like features which help mappers to map faster with open data or AI/ML generated like map data from the satellite imagery as well as street level imagery. So it's very hard task to build a map data of the world. So what we believe that we can build the tools and empower communities by building AI backed features where people can map faster and better. So we are kind of like solving this component. And wherever like we need like further data or data quality improvement, we have our internal mappers, which are also like contributing OpenStreetMap data directly. We are also working with different organizations who are helping us to improve maps. So one of the latest examples, probably it's one of the reasons like why we connected Youth Mappers is one of the partner. We are working together to improve pedestrian infrastructure on OpenStreetMap across like major US cities and European cities. So I think it's a fascinating collaboration between like companies and non-government organization, and we basically built something together, and then we are working with locals directly who are living in those areas to improve maps for themselves, for everyone, and data becomes available. TLDR, we believe that if we put the essential data out there on OpenStreetMap, let's say pedestrian infrastructure including sidewalks and crosswalk, and someone else will come and then update the width of sidewalk or type of crosswalk, etc. So data will get richer, and then this data will be available. I mean, if you go back to like 15 years ago, most of the building data sets were missing on OpenStreetMap. But right now we are getting in a place, most of the buildings are already there. So we need like more richer data sets. So what I'm seeing in the future with the mobile editing tools, and then also like companies are like investing more on OpenStreetMap, we will get like more richer data in OSM. So people will start to like add like businesses, more POI data, through like mobile editing apps, as well as right now like over to release places data, which is basically open data, which can be used for improving OpenStreetMap. I really want to see like OpenStreetMap communities are like adapting to ingesting this POI data set to OpenStreetMap, because it's one of the reason like why people are not really consuming OSM directly onto day-to-day life, because POI data is missing and they cannot really search what they look for. I think that might be opportunity. But overall for Meta, what we are doing now, how are we working with communities and how are we building tools for community to map pedestrian map data faster on OpenStreetMap? So we are helping like where the data is missing. Because when you go to OpenStreetMap, it looks complete. Visually like it's all there. Especially like if you go to New York or big cities, and then it's hard to see like what is missing there, What we are doing is like we are showing mappers which tiles are the missing pedestrian map data, and then what is missing there. And then on the top of that, we are running our ML model to identify like crossings, sidewalks, and then helping like our communities or partners to map like those places. I'm happy to share like very quick example. All right, I'll share with you.
There you go. Okay, perfect. So make sure it's working.
So what you're seeing here, it's a map of Naples, Italy. It's the one of the city in Italy, in the southern part of Italy. So for instance, like when you look at the map of Naples, you will see that it's well mapped. I mean, you got all the buildings, all the transportation networks. But what you're seeing here is like we think that like pedestrian map data is missing there. And then what we do is we are using like a tasking manager. It's a tool which helps communities to map collaboratively like certain areas. So when mappers go to these tiles, we're also like helping them to see certain tasks. Hey, this crosswalk is missing tagging, or there is a connectivity issue in this crosswalk, and update the connectivity issue or fix the issue. So we are kind of pointing out communities where they can map. So this is another example in Rome. So all the styles you're seeing here, like the dark blue ones are the ones that they are critical. They're in the really busy areas, and then they have high density issues on these areas. So we are kind of like trying to complete entire city coverage, and by pointing out which where the data is missing. And then you can see here like the green ones are the ones that like mapped and validated. They're still in progress if they're white. So these are some of the tools that we are using to help mappers how they can really focus in certain area, and then to look for the areas which needs improvement. And then we are helping them to like identify critical issues like connectivity, missing data, and other issues.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's always, when you look at a map, or any web map, it's hard to tell what's there and what's not, because it looks like that it's dense. But even just looking into a building, starting with the place example, that building might have multiple, places inside of it, might have multiple businesses. It might be, 2 addresses inside the same physical building, or many addresses. So there's a huge part of that that's, kind of one of those things that I think is really interesting to see how that evolves, and getting high quality place data that can be up to date. And then on top of that, of course, that roads and things like that are getting up to date on a regular basis, and big picture things, places like parks and paths and stuff like that. But how people can actually move about a city and interact with it safely, depending on whatever mode of transportation, or however you need to get around, specifically with like walking, or you name it, biking, or if you're using a wheelchair or anything like that. That's a huge missing gap that doesn't always look like it's missing. And I think it's really interesting that you're creating tools to directly address that problem, and give people and communities really the way to put that data out there. Because that's, strangely, if you go to like you said, if you go to New York, you can see where there's sidewalks and stuff like that, but it's not always clear in many different places. And that information can make a big difference for someone who needs to get around and needs that access and stuff like that, and can do it safely. And I think that's one piece that's like, it can benefit so many downstream kind of use cases. I think if you're listening to this and you work in geospatial, you can think of how having good sidewalk safe pedestrian data is key. But then what does that look like? What are you doing with that data now to really integrate it into kind of experiences that Meta's kind of curating and producing and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think like having a complete pedestrian map data as an open data will enable like a lot of innovation and research. We are seeing this. So for instance, like there is a institute which is called like Taskar Center in Washington State. So they are working on extracting entire sidewalk and crosswalk data sets from high resolution aerial imagery at the state level, and then with all the details of like accessibility and everything. So this can enable like a really large amount of use cases when it comes to like navigating people with disabilities, or even like simple pedestrian navigation for safely. Because one of the reason like most of the products out there is built for like car-centric navigation. There is a really limited products which can really do proper pedestrian navigation, and most of those products will be relying on OpenStreetMap data. You may be like familiar with like the apps like Organic Maps or Maps.me.com, OSM, OSMN, etc. So those are the tools which does pretty good with like pedestrian navigation, but it requires like really complete data. It may work for Manhattan, but if you go to like Brooklyn, it may not work. But luckily it's working for Brooklyn now, because we mapped entire Brooklyn with the OSM community in New York. So the data is like just starting point. Once you have data, it can leverage like different use cases. Our main use case, our users are mainly on walk. Whenever like they're searching stuff. So we know that like our users are like searching stuff on Instagram, where they want to go. So they're kind of like exploring, where should I go? What's my surrounding? So they want to understand their nearby locations and what's around them. And then what we want to provide them, to provide like complete experience whenever like they want to explore their surrounding, and then they can go there like safely as well. We have Ray-Ban Meta glasses, which supports like audio navigation, and it helps users to navigate from point A to B. Currently, it's a beta feature, but it's going to be rolled out shortly. So this is just a starting point, and then we believe that pedestrians need to have a right to navigate safely across like everywhere in the world. And we are starting with the major cities, and then we aim to basically have a global pedestrian map data of the world, which is open for everyone. And while we are solving our own problem, we are also helping other institutes, other organizations to solve their own problem as well with this data.
It's so cool to think about, and like where my head goes right now, hearing all of this is in two ways. Like, I can think about, if you're, looking and searching for places, having an integrated experience from, the social perspective, not just looking up a place, but understanding what people are saying about it, even seeing videos about it, getting a full kind of picture of that, navigating there, getting there safely, all of that. And then I was mentally doing a 180 and going to, well, if I was kind of someone studying urban morphology and wanted to understand, access and, something like that, I could immediately now use that same data that's powering that experience in something like OSMNX and OSMNX. I realized I said that fast. You're pulling the exact same data set into a Python workflow, understanding how people can access different parts of the city and understanding how that's changing over time, and that same data is powering both these very different experiences and different use cases. And that's what I love about that world, is that you can do two very different things and even more. I mean, like, those are just two examples, but I mean, it's so amazing that those two things are so interconnected and you're able to work on both at the same time and benefit that. And that's like I think the thing that I don't think a lot of people realize is how there's this just full downstream benefit across so many different places. I mean, do you have any cool stories like that where you're kind of like, I'm going to do this thing where it's like creating and impacting all these users and across the Meta suite of products. But then I'm seeing how this is like playing out in the real worlds of people actually having some really amazing impact.
Yeah, definitely. I want to share like a couple of examples with you. But before really doing this, I want to highlight that like very like simple terms. If you want to run like 15 minutes walkability analysis for your city, what you need is like sidewalk data for your city. Without having essential data, you cannot run this analysis. You don't know if you can really walk in the streets safely or not. So even with very simple terms, you cannot run any analysis with like really pure transportation data. You would need like pedestrian infrastructure and network to make such analysis. So that's really one of the easy and very most common use case. With like simple Python libraries, you can run like 15 minutes like walkability analysis for your city. But if you don't have this data, you cannot do it. So I'm really hoping that like having essential for every city can leverage bunch of like both academic research as well as a lot of use cases in our day-to-day life. And whenever like you are creating a routing for your runs or hikes, you can actually like just go and like do it. It was very rewarding to see that. I have mapped like central London where I get to live on OpenStreetMap, and then Strava basically roll out their maps and then update it, and then I can see like all my mapped effort straight on Strava, which is amazing. Now like I can just go and create my route where I want to run, or if I'm kind of like going somewhere with bike, I can navigate with the bike, which is quite rewarding to see in my day-to-day life. So if you go to like other use cases which I have been like working or involving, so we have been collaborating with city of Milan, which is the northern part of Italy. There is a city of Milan. Probably people know it's famous with the fashion. So city of Milan has started like maintaining sidewalk data on OpenStreetMap. And then this data supports a bunch of analysis. There was Paralympic Olympics in Milan, and then they were kind of like analyzing what's the traffic gonna look like, pedestrian traffic gonna look like in this certain part of the area. So they go even further they build the data sets of like the width of the sidewalk on the top of like open sidewalk data. So another example, like the collaboration with University of Arizona, students from there, like they map entire Phoenix. They contributed to OpenStreetMap. They map more than like 3,000 kilometer of sidewalk in a short period of time. And there was nothing previously in Phoenix almost. There was almost nothing like in Arizona, in Phoenix. Here what you're seeing is like thanks to like collaboration with youth mappers. Whatever you're seeing is like purple lines. They are pedestrian infrastructure. And right now like almost entire city is pretty much well mapped. And then I think like even one person can make huge difference. This year, early in summer, I was in State of the Map US, which was hosted in Boston this year by the OSM OpenStreetMap US. And I met a user from Miami, and he is dedicated to maintain pedestrian infrastructure in Miami himself. And then he's on the top of it, doing the all satellite and road network alignment. And we are actively like collaborating with this user and then getting a green light from this user like, hey, are you done with the satellite and road network alignment? We are ready to map the pedestrian infrastructure. So there are incredible community of like pedestrian mappers. OSM US also defined the NIV tier-based approach, how to map pedestrian infrastructure. So they're like bronze level, silver level, golden level. So the bronze level covers like only the geometry. But if you want to add like more details to your geometry, you can add the accessibility tags, even like you can add like the ramps or, what's the surface type of those ramps and everything. And I strongly believe that like when cities will have a complete sidewalk infrastructure, you may see the startup starting a business and then only focus on navigation for people with visual impair, because we know that there is a tactile paving on the crossings, so they can basically navigate safely. I'm very excited about the future of pedestrian map data at Open. They're also raising awareness of like opening up more data, kind of working with like different governmental organizations and then checking with them like if they have these data sets and if they can share it with publicly. I think like Canada is a great example. Release like entire Canada pedestrian network as an open data, which is open out there. I mean, if open data is not there, it doesn't mean data does not exist. Data might be somewhere sitting in someone's folder. I mean, my personal motivation is like how we get all of those files which are sitting someone's folder open, enabled for everyone. I'm really passionate about this. I strongly think like apart from my role at Meta, this can enable like a lot of future projects, a lot of new research, because you cannot do every data for doing research. For instance, like, these are like a couple of use cases I want to share.
Yeah. I mean, it's the cool part is these tools and the ways to do this are you're enabling it, and anyone can kind of contribute and be a part of that, which is the cool part. And I think, there's a lot of, you said we don't know what's going to come out of just putting this data out there. That's the exciting part, is that there's going to be new tools, new ways for people to interact with the built environment, all these things that have yet to come. But by putting more data and creating a more complete data set, I think we've seen that story play out before. When we've created more complete global data sets, really amazing things have happened. And, from creating comprehensive maps of the world to understanding speed limits, to understanding turn lanes, to understanding, parks and, paths and all these different things that have kind of slowly grown over time. And then, I think that's kind of the key. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I think we talked a little bit about, some of the tools that you also use to improve this data that have, some other ways that you can do this, things like using Mapillary and stuff like that. How are you integrating some of these tools into your workflow to just, kind of keep the momentum on adding and improving the data that you're already kind of collecting?
I want to double click on the definition I just shared with you, like especially on the collaboration and then computer vision. So why I highlighted collaboration is, so we have global community of like mappers across the world. They are passionate about like collecting street level imagery to improve their own local maps. So they might be individuals, they might be organizations, So they're contributing their data to our platform, which is called Mapillary. And we run like computer vision models to extract basically map data from those imagery, including like traffic signs and street furnitures. So all of this data, imagery and generated data, becomes available for everyone at no cost, including for like commercial usage, and it's open data. So imagery and generated data can be accessible in like different mapping ecosystem. So OpenStreetMap editors have access to Napillary and generated data to improve OpenStreetMap data. Also, like a lot of like organizational users, they are relying on like Esri products. They can access Mapillary imagery and data through Esri ecosystem. And you may be wondering, like, okay, what is in it for Meta? And then, so I will just gear back to our conversation with like pedestrian data. So we are basically like extracting sidewalk features and then crossings from street level imagery. So we got street level imagery in, we identify sidewalk detection, and we generate sidewalk detection. And we are not directly pushing this data to OpenStreetMap, but we are surfacing as a synthetic data, which we predict that there might be a sidewalk, and we are asking human, validators, human in the loop, to validate this data to improve OpenStreetMap data. Instead of like they are drawing an entire geometry manually from like entire sidewalk data, they're seeing the predicted geometry there, and then they're just verifying and then connecting the sidewalk data with the existing network, and it becomes available for everyone. So Mapillary does extract bunch of other stuff, including like speed limits, fire hydrants, manholes. So what we do is like we got dense street level imagery across different resources. We turn this into like 3D reconstructed model. We use structure from motion algorithm, and then we build a 3D model of the space. And then we also identify every object within this image. So we annotate like those pixels, and then we turn into 2D map data where you can see like every object in this 3D model is projected in the 2D map, and then all of this data becomes available for everyone. And let me quickly, all right, let's go here. So what you're seeing here is the green tracks are representing our coverage in Annapolis. It's and then so with like single click, you can extract entire fire hydrants in the city. So imagine you are GIS officer of this town and want to extract entire fire hydrant data sets. So classical method is like going there and surveying entire fire hydrants. Simply like Mapillary does imagery in, and then we generate like entire traffic signs for like everywhere globally. So we extract like more than 1,500 traffic signs across the world. Data is available for everyone. So simply like if you search your city and then enable like traffic sign layer on Mapillary, and then you will able to see like data is going to be populated. Entire data set is generated from like street level imagery and then becomes available. You can either download this data on your browser, or you could just use our API or Mapillary Python SDK to basically dump all traffic sign layer for your city. It might be like super powerful if you want to build up certain experiences with like traffic signs. So this is very popular among governmental organizational usage. They are maintaining like their assets using Mapillary. So there are a couple of examples on the top of my mind. For some reason, Fresno County is one of the organization. They are heavily using Mapillary for maintaining their assets database. So they regularly like capture imagery for entire like county, and then identifying like if the, let's say, stop sign is there still, or what's the status of the stop sign, and then they're building up a database of their assets inventory because they are responsible to report this to a state level and then federal level to request funding. It's really one of the most popular feature among like governmental organization or occupational users to use the traffic sign assets.
Yeah, it's cool because I know there's so much happening in AI, image models, and even just at Meta. We were just talking about that, before. It's the new Dino models, Llama. There's all these things happening, and then you have these really practical things to say. Here's a real clear way that we can take data that is in this platform and then turn it into immediate value of something that was incredibly manual before. Like literally, you had to go out and collect that data from a surveying and all these different things. Now you have a real direct way to do that. And that's very cool to see that these counties and GIS systems are actually taking that and doing it right away, which is great. And I think that's, kind of what I wanted to bring it around to is talking about, okay, from your interest in OSM and your personal interest in terms of, you talked about being really involved in OSM and from, impacts and projects in Turkey. Can you talk a little bit about that to say, okay, that's how you've seen that play out from that perspective and what it really, what all of this is kind of leading to and helping?
Yeah, I think like overall, like open data enables great opportunities for everyone. So we already discussed like governmental side of things, but there is a huge demand on open data from the humanitarian purposes as well. Personally, I have been involving responding earthquake mapping effort after the earthquake 2 years ago in Turkey. So we didn't have accessible building map data for the area which has been impacted from the disaster. And then in order to like do image analysis or even like support rescue officers on the field, you need geospatial data to support them, like which buildings were collapsed. So if you don't have available, accessible, open data for the building footprint, so what you do is like mapping building footprints when people are under rubble, which was very tragic moment. So myself and then a bunch of like other volunteers were basically like working many hours without sleeping and then helping like rescue officers to create a map for them, like which buildings were collapsed because it was completely flattened. We were trying to prioritize like where they need to prioritize like their operation. That was very tragic. This is one example which I experienced it, but like I'm pretty sure like there are a bunch of disasters are happening everywhere in the world when we are not ready for future disasters, and then we may have a similar experience there. All right. So basically, what we are doing, we had very tragic moment, and then we were trying to build pre-disaster geospatial infrastructure after the disaster, which is quite a worse place to be in. So right now what we are doing is we are working with our local OpenStreetMap community and how we can get ready for future disaster. When they happens, we want to have at least our existing geospatial data, which is available for everyone. It's not only for rescue officers. It should be like available for like any other like humanitarian organization they want to deliver aids, or even like for governmental organization. Because when disaster hits, it's quite hard to kind of like coordinate such effort. If you have a plan, what's your drone operator are doing like when disaster happens? How do you get imagery in this area? How do you map like collapsed buildings, etc.? So right now we are working on like disaster preparedness project where we are like mapping unmapped buildings in Istanbul. So Istanbul is home for like 20 million people, almost. And then but like part of the Istanbul is not fully mapped on OpenStreetMap. And then we want to make sure that when there is anything gonna happen in Istanbul, we want to make sure like people are having access to open data, and then they plan their rescue effort, they plan their dematch assessment report, and then also supporting like humanitarian aid. So one of the reason, this is like we were talking with the folks on the field. So when disaster happens, a lot of like utility poles and infrastructure are also impacted. There is no internet. So offline maps are quite critical. And then open map data also gives you like offline navigation and offline understanding of your surrounding. So that's why I personally feel very motivated and then encouraging like everyone to get ready with open data when it comes like disaster. preparedness. And then I'm spending part of my time for making sure that like Turkey has a open map data strategy in the realm of like OpenStreetMap, how geospatial data can be accessed in the case of like disasters. And then, I mean, this is completely different than my role at Meta. It's more like a personal capacity. And then, yeah, I have like my presentation at Phosphor G 2 years ago related to this talk. So we can probably like share with the audience as well.
I think what is really amazing is hearing both how, you as an individual can create these amazing impacts in across millions of people in lots of different places. And then also how this carries up into, kind of creating and developing these big products. That's what's been cool about this conversation is seeing how all of this is completely interconnected and it all spans around open data. And I think what this leaves me with is any person or individual can really start to, get involved in this and be a part of this and make an impact with this data. And I think that that's the one of the parts that I think would be interesting to kind of, hear from you. Okay, if you're interested in doing this, it takes communities, it takes people, and it takes individuals doing this type of work to build these things out. How would you suggest, if anyone's listening to this, then they want to build maps of infrastructure in their area, they want to be prepared and help their communities be ready, or they want to, map sidewalks or even something as, understanding the paths in their park. What can they do?
Yeah, I think like number one thing I would just suggest like map your neighborhood, register on OpenStreetMap, map your neighborhood. I think like that's the best thing you can really get started with because you are local from there and you know your surrounding and you can map the best in your local area. But if you want to do like more humanitarian focus contribution, there are like organization as Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team as well as Missing Maps. They're constantly like hosting mapathons or hosting in-person events where they are showing how you can basically get started with like mapping. I would definitely encourage them to check it out, like what is Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team is doing. That might be a great point to start with. But overall, understanding the value of open data will be if I will leave like one message with this conversation, I want to encourage everyone like to really relate with the importance of open data. And if there is no open data in your city, request it as a citizen of the city and then make sure that this data is open because this is our data. This is everyone's data.
Well, I think that was a really good way to leave it is it's your data, it's our data, and everyone can get access to it. I think that's kind of the future of the way mapping is happening. And thank you for being not just a good, amazing, not just good, but member of this community, sharing your experiences, and then talking about how all this fits together. Because I think sometimes it can be really overwhelming. But I think bringing it back to the individual and the local level, the experiences, be that on your phone, be that, in the future on your glasses, or be that in a situation where you need something and making those experiences part of our everyday life. So thanks for kind of helping navigate us through that and everything like that. I'll include all the links if you're, through all the things we talked about into the show notes here. So if you're checking this on YouTube, they'll be in the description. If you're listening to this on the platform, check the show notes before. But Said, thank you so much for taking the time. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's an important conversation to have. And I'm sure I'll be seeing some more of your work soon. Definitely, follow Said in LinkedIn if you want to stay kind of up to date on all the things he's working on. But yeah, thank you again. I appreciate the time and thanks for walking us through this.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thanks for having me and spreading the world.